We love a great UK summer, no doubt about it. Now, let's get into the cricket. A couple of weeks away, you're heading into the first Test match against India, first week of August. Are you happy with your top six at the moment? Because it's been a very big talking point on our podcast for the first 6 episodes. But could you pick your top six right now?
That is the issue for England. I would say they're stronger in bowling right now, particularly pace bowling. They've got a very strong set of pace bowlers. The top six is less settled. They've invested a lot in Burns and Sibley at the top of the order. And I think that's going to be the key in the 5 Test matches coming against India. Basically, England have not been at full strength for the last, 7 Test matches that we've seen. They got beat by New Zealand at home and in Sri Lanka. They did pretty well, but then got beat by India. But throughout those series, they've not been at full strength because of the amount of cricket they're playing under COVID. They've been chopping and changing, trying to give Owen Morgan his best side for T20. So we haven't seen England actually at full strength for some time. So we'll get a better idea of that, I think, in the India series. And the focus will be on the top 3, really. Burns, Sibley and Crawley. I think that's where they'll start against India. And depending on how they go against a pretty strong Indian attack, will kind of bleed into what happens in the Ashes. I mean, 4 down, England are pretty settled. And there's a lot of quality there. You're looking at Root and Pope, Stokes, Butler, and then the kind of the lower order. But it's just that top 3 where there's a bit of uncertainty. The one thing I would say, I know I've heard Junior before about England's opening, and I'll wait for him to come full barrel with me. But no. The one thing I would say is that the conditions in England over the last few years at the top of the order have been really challenging. I can't remember in the last 4 or 5 years seeing conditions as challenging as they've been in England. And Burns and Sibley actually average about 35 each in English conditions in the last 5 or 6 years in Test cricket, which compared to other openers around the world is not too bad. So you have to slightly temper what you've seen with the conditions that we've had.
No, I won't come at you, Athers. That's a good explanation. But obviously these Test matches will have a big bearing on the makeup of the top 6 in Australia. Will players like Dawood Malan and James Vince, will they come in the reckoning, those sort of players with just a touch of class?
Yeah, well, that is the issue, that they've invested with kind of Burns, Sibley, Crawley, all of whom have been slightly in and out, particularly this year with the form that we've seen, not great. And others like Malan and Vince, who did really well on the last Ashes tour, or pretty well. Malan got that 100 at Perth. Vince looked pretty good at Perth and Brisbane. Vince has just got runs in the most recent ODI games. But Vince bats down at 5 for Hampshire in first-class cricket. Malan's the one I think that they might have their eye on. If there's a slip-up in the top there between Burns and Sibley, and Sibley's the one, I think, under most pressure, because he's the one that you'd say has got less room for growth. You know, if you're talking about top-class players taking on the best bowlers, Sibley is a kind of grafter and a grinder. He's not going to score runs quickly, but he does get his runs. But so is there enough room for growth? What they might consider, if Crawley gets runs and Sibley doesn't, they might put Crawley up and then bring Malan in at 3 maybe. You know, if a guy gets 100, as Malan did at Perth last time, I think if you get 100 at Perth, you've got to be able to play a bit. Yep. He's a very fine player. And he's the one, I think, hovering in the wings there that might come in if there's a slip-up at the top.
Well, there's no doubt your bowling is pretty good as well. We think our bowling is going to be very, very good over here in Australia. But Jimmy Anderson taking his 1,000th first-class wicket. Is this going to be a situation, do you think, Michael, Anderson to be rotated, or you just go to him and say, which Test matches do you want to play? Or do you think you'll play all of them?
He won't play all of them. There's no way he'll play all of them. They come thick and fast. He's 39 years of age soon. He's in fantastic shape, I have to say. He's probably in better physical shape than he's ever been. He's a remarkable performer. As you say, that 1,000th wicket now, 600-odd Test wickets, getting better and better, especially in English conditions with a Duke's ball. But, you know, 5 Test matches crammed in with a Kookaburra ball in Australia is a wholly different thing. And what we've seen since the start of the pandemic, I think we had a stat on Sky the other day. England have used 17 fast bowlers across formats since the pandemic began. And the amount of cricket England are playing, I think they've played more than 100 days since the pandemic's began, which is more than double that Australia have played. So that's the reason they need this kind of big, strong squad of fast bowlers. And because of COVID, they'll bring a big squad to Australia. They're going to play games between themselves before the series begins. So you'll see Anderson there with Broad, but you'll see lots of others around, Wood and Stone and Archer, obviously, if he gets fit again. People like Bryden Carse look promising in the ODI series. So they've got a strong squad of fast bowlers. I said there's probably more depth than Australia, maybe not quite as much quality in the first 4 or 5. But Anderson's going to be rotated. I don't know which games he will play, but he ain't going to play all 5 for sure. Yeah,
just looking at the fixture list, I think he'll definitely play the first 2 tests, Brisbane and Adelaide, 2 swinging venues. I think that's
Adelaide's under lights,
under lights. But you guys have got a really varied attack. So you've got options with your out-and-out pace, Archer, Wood. You've got your swing bowlers in Wokes and Anderson, Broad to do the donkey work. So will they actually have the designated test before the start of the tour, or with each bowler, or will they do it on the run more?
I think they'll have an outline of a plan. That's normally how they work, as you say. They'll look at each of the venues. They did that in India, but they came unstuck in India.
Yeah.
You know, they had a day-night test in Ahmedabad there, and they had it in their mind they were going to play 4 seamers in that game because it was a day-night test, pink ball and all that, and the stats. But it was an absolute raging tournament, finished in 2 days. And England had 4 seamers. And, you know, looked a bit silly. So I think it's fine having your plan ahead of the series, but you have to be flexible within that. Again, going back to India, England won the first test there. They had it set in stone that Joss Butler would then fly home as part of his rest and rotation. And, you know, England just had a chance there to go at India in the second test match and win that series. So I'm all for, you know, having your plans ahead of the series, but you have to have some flexibility built in if a player is in absolutely brilliant form and wants to keep playing, or conditions are not quite what you imagine. You can't be inflexible. And England, as you say, with the bowlers at their disposal, they've got the class of Broad and Anderson. They've got the pace of Archer, Wood and Stone. They've got swing bowlers like Wokes. We've seen guys come in like Ollie Robinson, had an outstanding start to his test career against New Zealand. As I said, Bryden Carse looked pretty good in this one-day series. Saqib Mahmood is a young seamer who's really improving at a rate from Lancashire. So they've got plenty of options there. Spin, less so, but England are not going to win the Ashes with spin.